Americans and Europeans are willing to give Hezbollah the world. Why? Because they want to cut down the number of fronts. They want to decrease the number of fronts. And this, I think, shows how heroic Hezbollah and the resistance and its supporters are in Lebanon. Not only are they being abused by the fascists in Lebanon who supported the Israeli invasion in 1982 and who continue to be traitors to the country, but the West is offering them everything that they would ever they could never dream of getting the sort of concessions that they're being offered. All they have to do is just say, yes, we'll step back. But they won't do that because they're principled. So in certain ways, what they're doing is even more heroic in the sense that they are not willing to take concessions. They are willingly making sacrifices. I think that's something that history will remember. What Hezbollah and its supporters did. Every woman and child and man in Lebanon that's supporting, whether Christian, whether Sunni or Druze or Shia, Palestinian or Lebanese, whoever is supporting the resistance in Lebanon, they're all a part of this. They're all heroes. The same is true in Yemen. The Americans are willing to give the Yemeni government, Ansarullah, everything that it wants, but they won't accept it. They say, no, the genocide, the Holocaust has to end. And of course, imagine if Syria was to change its policy. Imagine if Syria said, okay, no, you think the Americans would solve their problems. And of course, first and foremost is Iran. None of the members, none of the parties, none of the components of the axis of resistance will take one step back. The Holocaust, the genocide must end. Apartheid must end. And history will remember. Remember, for years, for decades, the West has always been talking to us about human rights and human values and freedom and democracy. But I think Gaza has proven everything. And I think all those people who've had many questions about Iran, and I'm not saying Iran is a utopia or Lebanon is a utopia or Syria is a utopia, but in the case of Iran, more specifically, for over 40 years, people have been hearing only nasty and negative things about Iran and how horrible Iran is. But I think everyone has to rethink Iran because let's look at Gaza. The West is supporting the genocide. Iran is standing up against genocide. Iran is making sacrifices, and Iran is unwilling to do a deal. Unwilling. That's why we have maximum pressure sanctions. That's why and don't think it's Israel that's carrying out attacks against Iran. All the Western intelligence agencies, the Five Eyes, including New Zealand, the Five Eyes and Western governments, all of them are working together to gather intelligence against Iran. They're all working together against Iran for the sake of the Israeli regime. So Iran could imagine what concessions Iran could get, but Iran won't take them because this is there's a principle here. The Palestinian people are human beings. We cannot turn away. We cannot ignore what's going on in Palestine. So Iran will continue with the resistance. All these fronts will continue to remain active, and the Israeli regime will have to pay the ultimate price, and that is ending ethno-supremacism and apartheid. That is the only way to end this. There is no other way. There is no other way that the Israeli regime can continue. Israel will never be like it was before October the 7th. That Israel is gone. And it's only going to go further downhill as we move forward. So the crazy fanatics aside, those who are more pragmatic in Israel should start rethinking. Those who just want a better life should leave. Those who are pragmatic should rethink, like the leaders in South Africa did, and look at the reality on the ground. And when that happens, those fanatics will not be enough in number to be able to sustain the regime.
I think those are excellent points, especially about your analysis of Hezbollah in particular, but really the entirety of the resistance. Surely the Americans, the United States, would love to negotiate some kind of pause. That's exactly what this Council on Foreign Relations article, the Foreign Affairs, that's what it's kind of saying is
And that's
make.
what they've been doing. They've been trying to persuade Hezbollah or Syria or Yemen and Iran and others to shift away from the resistance. And they're willing to give a great deal, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and not only is that going to happen, but it is being pushed as if some kind of long war situation, maybe a lesser kinetic conflict for Israel is actually in its best interest. But on the same front, the U.S. will acknowledge that Israel's own capabilities are surely unable to absorb the stress of having to fight at any level on this number of fronts. But that's seemingly where this is going, Professor Marty. Where do you see this future for Israel and this conflict generally? Because what I see is, as you said, all these fronts are going to continue, but that is not sustainable in the least. So something has got to give.
Well, it doesn't matter who is in the White House. The United States is declining. Relatively speaking, it's on the decline. It has huge internal problems, economic problems, and it is isolated across the world. Europe is in far worse shape than the United States. And these are the regimes that sustain Israel. So as these regimes go downhill, and remember, it's not just Gaza, it's China, it's Ukraine, it's they're facing, and it's countries across the global south that are moving closer to each other. BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, other regional organizations, they are going to gradually, I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but gradually they're going to become closer. They're going to find means to do trade and business without the West being able to interfere. It may take time, but it's happening, and the Americans are pushing the world in that direction. So the Americans in the West are going to decline. Where does the Israeli regime get its support? It gets it from the West. It's a weak and vulnerable and small regime, as we were discussing earlier. Without the West, they cannot continue this war for a week. It would be over. So it doesn't matter if Trump's in the White House or Harris is in the White House. The reality on the ground is that the Israeli regime and its Western backers are on the decline, and that the world despises this regime. Even in the United States, you see people on the right and the left, how they're making they're being removed from YouTube, regardless of what we may think about the politics of different people. But they attack the Israeli regime for what it's doing, and they're being removed. All of this is exposing the West more and more than ever before. It's showing how brutal and barbaric these regimes are. It shows how fundamentally hostile they are towards human rights. It shows that the liberals in the United States are as fascistic as any other fascist group in human history, because they're supporting this genocide. They're behind the genocide. They're with the genocide, whether it's Christian Zionists or liberals in the United States. But the population in the United States is turning against it, whether Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or anyone else, people from all walks of life. And that's what's happening across the world. So the Israeli regime doesn't have a future. And that we see no sign of a ceasefire. The longer the war continues, the worse it is for the Israeli regime, because they have the most to lose. Lebanon, people die, it hurts the economy, but the Israeli economy is being devastated because they had a much larger economy. In Yemen, people die, people suffer, but the economy in Yemen has already been destroyed and devastated. So Israel, the Israeli regime loses more than anyone else. So and then if the regime expands the war, it only makes it worse for itself. It cannot escape defeat. So the longer the